Hello viewers, today I'm going to bring you a product review. This is an acrylic turntable mat that I picked up on Amazon. If you're not familiar with this type of product or what it's for, whole purpose of it is to reduce resonance. Now what is resonance? Resonance is vibrations that are basically not part of the signal that's eventually reaching the speakers. They exist independently on their own, and resonance, whether it's in your speaker, in your amplifier, at the turntable level, resonance is always a bad thing. How bad? It's so bad Hollywood has made movies about resonance. So how does resonance come into play at the level of the record? Well, as your stylus is traveling down the grooves, vibrating back and forth, those vibrations travel up the cantilever into the cartridge to the amplifier, eventually out to your speaker. At the same time, vibrations are radiating from the stylus down into the record, where they can be reflected back up into the cartridge and out your speakers. How do we defeat that? Or in theory, with an acrylic mat, we're going to increase the overall mass of the LP, reducing the resonant frequency down below the hearing level, and therefore eliminating. Now for an acrylic turntable mat to be effective, the LP has to be flat against the mat so that they basically operate as one unit. Now before you go buying an acrylic turntable mat, you want to make sure that your turntable platter is compatible with one. And I'll show you 3 examples. Now this is my Hitachi linear tracking, and if you'll notice, the turntable mat does not reach all the way to the spindle. There's a ring, there's a ring area that the turntable mat centers itself on at the spindle. So we remove the turntable mat, and what we'll find is that this center portion is raised above the rest of the platter. So if you put the acrylic mat on there, it's going to teeter and totter on that center hub, and that is completely incompatible with an acrylic mat. This is the platter to my dual 714Q turntable. Now not only is this mat glued down to the aluminum platter, but there is a high lip around the outside of the platter. So if you remove this and put an acrylic turntable mat on here, it's going to be riding on that and completely hollow from the circumference all the way down to the spindle. So if you put a weight on there, you're going to sink down in the middle. This will not work with an acrylic mat. Finally, we're going to look at my Sony linear tracking turntable. Now if you have a linear tracking or any turntable that has holes for a sensor to go through to see what size the vinyl is that you have on the turntable, if you have that, you're going to need to use a clear acrylic turntable mat. So opaque white like I have would not work on this turntable. Otherwise, if we take the mat off, notice we have a nice flat surface with no lips, no ridges, so that the turntable mat can sit right down on the aluminum platter and have nice solid contact there. And in addition, if you had a turntable weight on top of everything, it would hold it nice and flat against the platter. This is the type of platter that is ideal for the acrylic turntable mat. Okay, so let's have a look at this turntable mat. First thing you'll notice is that there is a divot in the center to accommodate the label, because the label area is raised up, and like I mentioned earlier, the record has to sit flat onto the acrylic mat for it to be effective. Now this, in my opinion, is cut way too deep, especially if you're going to use a turntable weight on top of it. Turntable weight is a good idea. You can put the turntable weight down and it's going to sink down into this hole because it's too wide and too deep, and it could possibly warp your record upward, lifting it up off the mat. But that's not where the problem ends. They put enough thought into it to put a recess in there, albeit oversized, to accommodate the label. They never did anything to accommodate the outer lip of the LP. This outer lip is raised, and this acrylic mat is the exact same size. So basically, the record is riding on its outer lip, and the rest of the record, without a weight, if you don't have a weight on it, is just floating over top of the mat, negating all benefits that you would potentially get from using an acrylic turntable mat. And lastly, the edge of the circumference of this turntable mat is unfinished. It's a rough cut edge. It's very sharp, and as you're putting your LP onto the platter, if you brush the grooves across this sharp edge, you're going to put permanent clicks and pops into your record. And so that's unacceptable. This should be a rounded, polished edge. And also, in addition, I feel that it should slope downward along the circumference also to accommodate the lip on the LP. In my listening tests, what difference did I hear? For the most part, I heard absolutely no difference whatsoever. The exception being is when I tested the mat out without removing the rubber mat that was originally on the turntable. Now, why do we put it directly onto the aluminum platter? Two reasons. Number one is you want to be on the most solid surface available, so you couple down to the aluminum platter. And number two is vertical tracking angle. Now, vertical tracking angle is the angle at which the stylus rides in the groove. Now, remember your tone arm, back of the tone arm where the counterweight is, that's a fixed point. So if you start stacking up higher and higher, you are going to start pivoting away. So the stylus is meant to ride in the grooves at a specific angle. If you start raising up, stacking up below the record that you're playing, that stylus is going to start to go off angle. If you have a conical stylus, round stylus, not going to be as important. But when you get into elliptical, and then you get into fine line and into other better styluses, it's going to become more and more critical. And when I stacked this, put this on top of the rubber turntable mat and played a record on top of it, I found that the high frequencies became very, very brittle sounding. And I believe that is the reason why, is because the vertical tracking angle was getting thrown off. Okay, so what is my opinion on, let's start with this specific acrylic turntable mat. With all of its flaws, at $30, you can get the exact same thing on Amazon for like $10. So this is absolutely, don't waste your money on this at all. As far as the $10 version, which is the exact same thing, I still think it's a waste of money. My opinion on the acrylic turntable mats in general, so let's say you have the perfect turntable platter. It's flat, smooth, and this acrylic mat's going to sit flat down onto it. Perfect platter. Let's say you have that. Let's say you splurged, spent the money on the perfect acrylic mat, which would have the indentation for the label, but not too big and not too deep, so you don't risk warping the record, and you have good solid contact. And let's say the circumference is a little smaller than an LP, so you're avoiding the lip of the LP. And let's also say that the outer lip of the acrylic mat is rounded and polished smooth, so it isn't going to scratch your records. Let's say you have all that. There's still one more variable that you can't control. and that is the LP itself. Now, I don't know about you, but most of my LPs are vintage and they're fairly lightweight. Today's LPs are thankfully much heavier. I would say maybe 20% of them don't have some sort of warp to them. So no matter what you do, when you get to the final item, the LP, you're at a disadvantage. Because if it's warped, and this is a very good example because this LP, you can't see it, but it is slightly bowl shaped. So if the bowl is facing down, I can put a weight, turntable weight in the middle and hopefully flatten it out. But when the bowl shape is up, there's nothing you can do. And all that air gap underneath, this is not going to couple with the acrylic mat, and you're going to get no benefit whatsoever. In fact, with the way the rubber mat on a turntable often has ribs, etc., you might actually get better results with the rubber original stock mat than you would with the acrylic mat. So my opinion is, rather than putting your money into a higher quality acrylic mat that you may sometimes see a difference and maybe not, buy yourself a turntable weight that sits right in the middle, holds that LP down as securely as possible to your platter, and I think that's where you will see your most benefit. Well, that's my opinion. If you like my video, please like, share, and please hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Vibrations are God damn.